Big Finish's Dark Gallifrey set is well underway. Last month we had their first release, which was Dark Gallifrey Morbius Part 1. We reviewed this last month. It's written by Tim Foley, and the Part 1 takes place during the dark times of Gallifrey after an astonishingly devastating war that saw the defeat of the Time Lord Morbius, thanks to Time Lord armies and also the Sisterhood of Khan. And you have this ship that is now leaving, the Proteus, which is going through the time vortex to get back home to Gallifrey. And you have a member in training of the Sisterhood of Khan on the ship. You've got this captain, Time Lord, who has had a big regeneration mishap and is clearly suffering from PTSD on the ship. The conclusion of this story, which is part 1 of 3 of this Morbius trilogy, saw a shimmering man being brought on board of the ship and them running aground on an icy world, presumably to their deaths. And part 1 clearly pays homage to The Last Voyage of the Demeter, known to niche horror fans as Captain's Log, which is the chapter in Bram Stoker's Dracula, where Dracula is on the voyage of the Demeter and kills most of the crew and drives them insane through a really awesome, horrific horror chapter. Stephen Moffat adapted that story for his Dracula, his and Mark Gatiss' TV series a couple of years ago. Now we have Part 2, Dark Gallifrey Morbius Part 2, which picks up where the first one left off, where the Proteus has run aground on an ice world, and they have to go out and investigate because they are running low on supplies. They're hoping that they might be able to find some way to survive in the harsh tundra. But Morbius, played by Samuel West, is hoping to come back from the dead to re-establish his cult of Morbius. So you've got this young member in training of the Sisterhood of Khan who goes onto the surface of the planet with a couple of volunteers, with Captain Argento, played by Rachel Atkins, who is just clearly suffering from some massive PTSD after the conflicts that she's been fighting in order to defeat Morbius, and is just infuriated at the idea that anyone could have followed Morbius, anyone could have been happy with Morbius. They go into the harsh tundra and they discover essentially a fortress of solitude, this great big ice palace, this ice cavern, which contains artwork, which contains portals throughout time. It also contains somebody who has the likeness, the human form likeness of Morbius, called the Interface, a robotic artificial intelligence, or maybe not, of Morbius, played by Samuel West, who greets them. Let's play a clip from Morbius Part 2.
Righto. Not the response I was expecting.
We know who you are.
He is not the man you think he is. He is not a man at all.
What do you mean?
The glowing gentleman speaks the truth. I am not Morbius.
His twin? His shadow?
His ghost. Look how the winds do not touch him. The way the light bends around him.
Clever girl.
You're a projection, then? Some kind of hologram?
Correct.
What is seen and unseen. What will be and unbe.
You know he's dead. Yes? You know he's not coming back.
You say that, but for a moment you clearly thought he had. And that amuses me.
You can't be amused. You're a program, some long-forgotten... Why are you here?
I am here to make visitors welcome. If you wish to seek refuge from all this bluster, follow me in.
Can we trust this hollow man?
Nothing to trust. Ashes to ashes. Dust to dust.
Silence! I'm trying to think. If we follow him in, it's like striding into the jaws of a beast. But if there's power enough for a projection, we may be able to find... I don't know, a transmitter to reach out to the Time Lords?
And we could all do with the refuge he mentioned.
We keep our wits about us, men. If this place belonged to Morbius, perhaps it's some sort of barracks. Or arsenal. Or perhaps it's simply a trap.
So if the first story in this saga was Gilda's story, played by Lara Lemon, she's the one who is the Sisterhood of Khan in training, essentially, who's on this mission, then this story basically belongs to Captain Argento, who you heard in the clip there, played by Rachel Atkins, where she is having to come to terms with the idea that the war that she was fighting might not have been an entirely just war, or the idea that maybe Morbius had such profound cult following because of the rabid inequality that was taking place within Gallifrey. So obviously Morbius is a bad Time Lord, but he's able to like use his charisma and use his psychological intelligence to be able to worm his way in to basically anybody who he talks to into their mind in order to corrupt them from the inside out. And this is happening as well on board of the ship. We've got the first mate there who is trying to repair the ship because it's run aground, and he's getting help from some of the prisoners that basically the setup of the story is that the Proteus has got some prisoners of war who were loyal to Morbius, and they're taking them back to Gallifrey to stand trial. However, some of them are brought on deck in order to help repair, and they're able to have conversations with some of the crewmates there who are able to maybe influence their thoughts on Morbius, and maybe he wasn't such a bad guy after all. It is, in terms of like the actual story itself, a slight step down from the first one, but that's mainly because I think the first one was so strong in mood and atmosphere. This one is very dialogue heavy, and the dialogue is really, really strong though, and Samuel West as the interface and also Morbius is such a slimy piece of work, but you also just love listening to him speak, and you can tell why people followed him. In terms of the pantheon of rogue Time Lords, you have characters like the Master, you have characters like the Rani and Rassilon, etc. These are characters who the Dark Gallifrey set are going to be centering around as far as we can tell in the near future. But for Morbius, I think what sets him apart is that he is essentially a cult leader. And that's not something that the Master or Rassilon are able to like be so easily boxed into that category. Like there's of course like some elements to it for Rassilon as well, but for Morbius they fully go into like this is the guy who will convince his followers to drink the Kool-Aid. You know, he's the Jonestown leader of Gallifrey, essentially, as dark as that association is, but that's clearly what the Dark Gallifrey series is trying to take those parallels. Now, the standout moments here are the interesting retconning or establishing of other Time Lords' backstories and how they relate to characters like Captain Argento. Don't go into the cast list for Dark Gallifrey Morbius Part 2, because there is a bit of a spoiler there, but there is a particular origin story for another Time Lord in this story. That's very interesting for Big Finish fans, for long-time Big Finish fans, a character who they keep on bringing back. So there's not much of a surprise factor there. But if you've not listened to this yet, don't go into the cast list yet. But the dialogue scenes and the way that Rachel Atkins plays the role, there's a real weakness to Captain Argento, but in that there's also like she's like a wounded animal where she is at her most dangerous because she's at her most vulnerable. She is physically frail. She is having to rely on a Sisterhood of Khan elixir of life just to keep her body from falling apart, essentially, because it was killed in battle, but was granted another regeneration. But it's a regeneration that has gone horribly wrong, and she now is trying to basically power through it. And the fact that she is so physically frail and weak, anybody on the ship could have a mutiny against her. And physically, in a power struggle, she would lose. But the fact that nobody does, because they're still afraid of her, is such an interesting power dynamic to have for a story at the center, like to have as like an undercurrent, because this is a story that is about Morbius and has Morbius in the center of it, but it's about how these fallible, corruptible people are able to be corrupted and coerced by somebody like Morbius. You know, Morbius is the undercurrent, but you know, there are these other characters who are along for the ride who are susceptible to him, against all of their judgments, all of every single bone and impulse in their body, as Captain Argento has fought a very brutal war to stop Morbius, but even she is not immune to his his persuasive ways. So Morbius Part 2 sets the stage for the finale next month, which will feature Tom Baker as well as the Fourth Doctor. Be interesting to see how that all pans out. But Morbius Part 2 is a really strong continuation. It is a middle chapter, but it's a middle chapter that advances the story in really satisfying ways. Some really great and memorable set pieces. One character gets a particularly brutal fate that is quite hard to listen to. And it's great to see that Tim Foley's penchant for incredible dialogue and intensely strong characterization of like fully fleshed out and three-dimensional, very heavily textured characters has not gone anywhere. This was a really strong listen. I'm looking forward to seeing how this trilogy concludes and if Tim Foley is able to stick the landing. But yeah, this is a really strong continuation. It's hard for me to recommend it because, like, you know, maybe it falls apart in the final chapter, but if you liked part 1, you're going to like part 2 and seeing the story continue. It's a continuation of Morbius, and it does its job really effectively with really strong characters, great set pieces. I liked this one a lot. Let's see about next month. Big Finish doing Morbius stuff. Hell yeah, hope Matt Smith gets to do a silly dance again. Ha 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 ha. Even the Big Finish Twitter account is getting in on the It's Morbin Time thing. Yeah, even Big Finish is getting in on it. It's Morbin Time. Out now. It's Morbin Time Part 2. Yep, it's almost Morbin Time. Big Finish Insider's really cooking. I don't know who the Big Finish Insider is or how they're allowed to get away with this, but yeah. Even Morbius to come.